Hey, so tonight we're going to talk about something that'll make you real grateful for that fridge in your kitchen. We're heading back to Victorian England, where people had to get seriously creative with what they ate just to stay alive. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. All right, find that cozy spot. Take a nice, slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to Victorian England. So congratulations, you just woke up in London sometime around 1850. Your eyes blink open in the dim pre-dawn light filtering through a grimy window. The first thing you notice isn't the sight, but the smell, a mixture of coal smoke, damp wool, and something less pleasant from the chamber pot in the corner that needs emptying. You're lying on a lumpy straw mattress, not rough wool like most people think. That would be a luxury. This is just a cotton sack stuffed with whatever straw your family could gather. Scratchy, damp, and definitely shared with some tiny, unwelcome visitors that occasionally bite. Your stomach growls immediately. That hollow, empty feeling is your constant companion in this time. Your fingers are cold as you pull the thin blanket aside. The chill of the room hits you hard. No central heating here, just the lingering warmth from last night's coal fire, which died out hours ago because coal costs money, and money is something your family doesn't have much of. Outside, you can already hear the calls of street vendors. Hot eels! Get your hot eels! A woman's voice, rough from years of shouting, cuts through the thin walls. London is waking up, and with it, the daily struggle to find enough food to keep going. Good news, you're alive in one of the most transformative periods in human history. The Industrial Revolution is changing everything, and Queen Victoria sits on the throne of the most powerful empire the world has ever seen. Bad news. Unless you're part of the aristocracy or the emerging middle class, your relationship with food is complicated. By complicated, I mean you're probably hungry most of the time. The Victorian era, stretching from 1837 when Victoria took the throne until her death in 1901, was a time of massive change. And nowhere was this change more evident than in what people ate and how they got it. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, your bare feet touching the cold wooden floor. The boards creak. If you're lucky, you live in a small apartment with just your immediate family. If you're not, you might be sharing a single room with multiple families, taking turns sleeping in the same bed. Hot bunking, they called it. When one person got up for work, another would take their spot while it was still warm. You coming down for breakfast? A voice calls from below. Your mother, already up for hours. Breakfast. The word itself makes your stomach clench harder. What would be on the table today? If you're fortunate, maybe some bread, not the soft, fluffy stuff you're used to. Victorian bread was dense, heavy, filling. It had to be. For many, it was the main source of calories for the entire day. You make your way down the narrow stairs, each step groaning under your weight. The kitchen, if you can call it that, is just a small hearth with a pot hanging over it. No refrigerator, no stove as you know it, just fire when you can afford the fuel. Tea's brewing, your mother says, not looking up from the pot she's stirring. Tea, but not as you know it. This is weak, watery tea, the leaves already used several times over. The rich might toss tea leaves after one use. The working class and poor would reuse them until there was barely any flavour left. Any bread? You ask, trying not to sound too hopeful. She nods toward a small loaf on the table. Half for now, half for tonight. You tear off your portion. It's hard, a bit stale, but it's food. You dip it into your tea to soften it, a common trick of the time. As you chew, you think about the day ahead and about your next meal, if there'll be one. Now, I want you to understand something. The Victorian era wasn't the same for everyone. What you ate depended heavily on three things: your social class, whether you lived in the city or countryside, and the specific decade of the Victorian period you lived in. Because here's the thing, food in Victorian England changed dramatically from the beginning to the end of the era. The early Victorian period was rough for many. The 1840s were even called the Hungry Forties because of widespread food shortages and high prices. But by the end of Victoria's reign, even working-class folks were eating better than they had in centuries. You finish your bread and tea. Your mother hands you a small bundle. For lunch, she says. Don't eat it all at once. Inside the cloth is another piece of bread, maybe with a scraping of dripping, the congealed fat from yesterday's meat cooking, if your family had any meat at all. This might be all you'd have until evening. As you step outside into the London street, the full sensory assault of Victorian urban life hits you. The noise is deafening, vendors shouting, horses clopping, carriage wheels on cobblestones, factory whistles in the distance. The smell is, well, let's just say modern sewage systems weren't fully implemented yet. But among all this chaos is something that might surprise you. Food. Everywhere. Street food. Victorian cities, especially London, had an incredible variety of street food available. Not that you could afford much of it, but it was there, tempting you with smells that made your mouth water. Penny a bowl. Hot eels, penny a bowl. That woman's voice again. You look over to see a street vendor with a large metal can, steam rising from it. Inside are chopped eels that have been boiled in a herby broth. For many working-class Londoners, this was a quick, hot, relatively nutritious meal they could afford. The Thames River teemed with eels back then. They were abundant, cheap, and therefore a staple for the poor. They'd be chopped into pieces, boiled with herbs and spices, and served hot in a broth that had been thickened slightly with flour. If you wanted to get fancy, you could have jellied eels. The same basic dish, but allowed to cool so the natural gelatin from the eels would set the broth into a wobbly jelly. Sounds weird now, but in Victorian London, this was comfort food. You keep walking, passing more food vendors. There's a man selling whelks, sea snails essentially, that have been pickled to preserve them. Another offers sheep's trotters, literally the feet of sheep that have been boiled until the meat falls off the bone. A woman has a tray of hot potatoes baked in their jackets and split open, letting off steam in the cold morning air. This was the fast food of Victorian England. Quick, portable, filling, and most importantly, cheap. For many workers, buying from these vendors was easier than trying to cook at home, especially if home was just a single room with no proper cooking facilities. Your stomach growls again as you pass them by. The penny in your pocket needs to be saved for something more substantial later. As you walk, let's talk about those Victorian class divisions, because they were stark when it came to food. At the top, you had the aristocracy and upper classes. These folks were eating like, well, kings, multiple course meals, exotic imported foods, out-of-season fruits and vegetables grown in special heated greenhouses. A dinner party might include soups, fish courses, multiple meat dishes, elaborate desserts, and fine wines. The middle class tried to imitate this when they could, though usually with fewer courses and less extravagance. A middle-class family might have a roast joint of meat for Sunday dinner, the highlight of their culinary week, with the leftovers carefully managed to last for several more days. Then there was everyone else, the working classes, the poor, the destitute. Their relationship with food was primarily functional. Get enough calories to keep working. Taste, variety, nutrition as we understand it today, luxuries they could rarely afford to consider. You're most likely in this last group. Food for you isn't about enjoyment. It's about survival. By midday, your stomach is complaining loudly. You find a quiet spot to unwrap your bundle. The bread has gone even harder, but the dripping spread on it provides some much-needed fat and flavour. You force yourself to eat only half, re-wrapping the rest for later. Oi, what you got there? A street urchin, even more ragged than you, has spotted your food. You turn away, protecting your small meal. Hunger makes everyone a little selfish. Just bread, you mutter. The kid lingers, hope in their eyes, but eventually moves on when it's clear you're not sharing. You feel a pang of guilt, but not enough to give up your food. That's the reality of Victorian poverty. Everyone's hungry, but you can only take care of yourself and maybe your immediate family. As the afternoon wears on, you pass through a slightly wealthier neighbourhood. Through a basement window, you catch a glimpse of a cook working in a kitchen. The smell wafting up is intoxicating. Some kind of meat stew, you think. Your mouth waters involuntarily. That's another thing about Victorian England. The contrast between abundance and scarcity was physically visible as you moved through different parts of the city. The rich didn't just eat different food, they lived in entirely different food environments. Evening approaches and you head home tired from a long day's work. Your mother has the pot going again over the fire. Tonight's dinner is a vegetable soup, mostly cabbage and onions, with a potato or two if you're lucky. Maybe there's a small piece of bacon or salt pork added for flavour. The precious fat and salt transforming the humble vegetables into something more satisfying. Cabbage was a mainstay of the Victorian working-class diet. It was cheap, available year-round, and filling. Isabella Beeton, the famous Victorian domestic writer, specifically recommended fried cabbage as an economical meal that could feed a whole family. But it wasn't just cabbage. Onions, leeks, turnips, carrots. These vegetables formed the backbone of poor people's nutrition. They might not have been exciting, but they kept you alive. You settle down to your bowl of soup, soaking the other half of your midday bread in it to soften the now rock-hard crust. The warm liquid feels good in your belly, though you know you'll be hungry again before morning. Will we have meat this Sunday? You ask your mother. Sunday dinner was when even poor families tried to have some meat if they could possibly afford it. She sighs. We'll see what's left at the butcher's late Saturday. Maybe some shin or cheek we can stew. That was the reality for many, buying the cheapest cuts of meat, the parts that the wealthy wouldn't touch. Shin, cheek, offal, organ meats like liver, kidney, heart. These were the proteins of the poor. They required long, slow cooking to make them tender, but they were nutritious and flavourful in their own way. If meat was truly unaffordable, there were other options for protein. Eggs if your family kept chickens or cheese, though both were often sold rather than eaten if money was tight. Beans provided protein too, and were a common ingredient in soups and stews. After dinner, your mother makes a final pot of tea, even weaker than the morning's brew. The same leaves, now giving up their last hint of flavour. You drink it anyway, the warmth more important than the taste. As you climb back up to your bed, the straw mattress doesn't seem quite so uncomfortable now that you're exhausted. Your stomach isn't full, it's rarely truly full, but the hollow ache has subsided for a while. You drift off to sleep thinking about Sunday, hoping for that small piece of meat to look forward to. In the streets below, the last calls of the food vendors fade as they pack up for the night. Hot eels and penny pies give way to the general rumble of a city that never truly sleeps, even in Victorian times. That's the daily rhythm of food for the Victorian working poor, not the elaborate dinner parties depicted in costume dramas, but a constant creative struggle to get enough calories to keep going. Bread, vegetables, weak tea and occasional meat. Simple food, but precious. You shift slightly, finding that perfect spot as the carriage wheels rumble over cobblestones outside and your body relaxes a bit more, getting comfortable now as markets begin setting up for the next day, fishmongers arranging their catches, bakers firing up ovens. And in the darkness beyond the city, farmers loading wagons with fresh produce to bring to town. Morning light filters through the grimy window again. Another day in Victorian London. Your stomach wakes before you do, that familiar emptiness already making itself known. But today might be different. Today is market day. You stretch on your straw mattress, feeling the individual stalks poke through the thin fabric. The air in the room is cold enough to see your breath, little clouds forming with each exhale. Winter in Victorian England was harsh for the poor. Without enough fuel for heating, cold and hunger formed a cruel partnership. Downstairs you can hear your mother already moving around, the scrape of the fire being lit. The clank of the kettle, the daily rhythm begins again. But wait, there's another smell this morning. Something sweet? Your nose isn't playing tricks. Today there might be a rare treat. You hurry downstairs, more eager than usual. Your mother is at the small table, carefully cutting something into portions. She looks up and smiles, a tired smile, but genuine. Mr. Wilson at the bakery gave me the broken bits, she explains. Said they were too damaged to sell, but still good to eat. On the table are pieces of what looks like some kind of cake or sweet bread. Nothing fancy by modern standards, but in Victorian working-class London, this is like finding treasure. It's just the edges of a plum cake, she says, pushing a piece towards you, but it'll make the tea better. Now, sweets in the Victorian era weren't the everyday items they are for us. Sugar had a complex history tied to colonialism, slavery, and global trade. By the mid-1800s, it was becoming more affordable, but it was still relatively expensive for working-class families. A sweet treat was exactly that, a treat, not a daily expectation. You take a bite of the cake along with a sip of the morning's first brew of tea. The sweetness explodes on your tongue. It's almost shocking after days of bland bread and cabbage. There's a hint of dried fruit, not fresh but plumped up in the baking. It's delicious. This moment, this simple pleasure tells us something important about Victorian food. The contrast between everyday subsistence and occasional indulgence was stark. That contrast made the rare treats all the more meaningful. As you savour the unexpected breakfast, let me tell you about the evolution of sugar in Victorian England, because it's a fascinating story that shaped their world and still influences ours. At the beginning of the 19th century, sugar was still quite expensive. It had to be imported from colonies in the Caribbean and elsewhere, where it was produced through the brutal labour of enslaved people. The wealthy used sugar lavishly. Elaborate sweet dishes were a way to show off your wealth and status. The poor might get a taste of sweetness only on special occasions. But several things changed during Victoria's reign. First, the abolition of slavery in the British Empire in 1833, just before Victoria took the throne, disrupted the sugar trade, initially causing prices to rise. Then came the Sugar Act of 1874, which removed the heavy taxes on imported sugar. Suddenly, this once luxury item became more accessible to ordinary people. The result? A sweet tooth revolution. Candy and confectionery exploded in popularity. By the end of the Victorian era, sweets were being manufactured and sold on a scale never seen before. You finish your cake, savouring the last crumbs. It's market day, which means the streets will be full of vendors selling every kind of food imaginable. You might not be able to afford much of it, but the spectacle itself is worth experiencing. Going to try for work at the docks today, you tell your mother. They sometimes need extra hands when the ships come in. She nods, hope and worry battling in her expression. Dock work is hard and dangerous, but it pays, and sometimes there are opportunities to bring home food that would otherwise be wasted. You head out into the morning bustle. The street is already alive with activity. A milkmaid is making her rounds, carrying pails of fresh milk to the wealthier homes. You watch her knock on a door, measure out the family's daily portion, and collect her payment. Milk in Victorian cities was a complicated business. Without refrigeration, it had to be delivered daily, and even then, it didn't stay fresh long. Adulteration was common. Dishonest sellers would water it down or add chalk to improve its appearance. The poor rarely got fresh milk, making do with a splash in their tea if they could afford it at all. As you walk toward the docks, the streets get busier. Market day brings everyone out, from wealthy housekeepers buying for their employers' tables to poor women trying to stretch pennies as far as possible. The market itself is a sensory overload. Shouting vendors, haggling customers, the smell of fresh produce mixed with less pleasant urban odors, colors everywhere. The red of tomatoes, the green of cabbages, the brown and white of eggs, the silver flash of fish scales. Speaking of fish, the fishmonger's stall is one of the busiest. Fish was an important protein source for Victorians of all classes, though what kind you ate depended on your wealth. The rich might enjoy salmon or trout. The middle classes would have cod or haddock. The poor made do with herring, sprats, eels, and other cheaper options. Fresh cod, straight off the boat, a vendor shouts, displaying his wares on a bed of ice, a luxury in itself, ice being a valuable commodity before refrigeration. Next to him, another seller has a different approach. Penny a scoop, whelks and cockles, penny a scoop. Shellfish was particularly important for the urban poor. Oysters, which we now consider a luxury food, were once so plentiful in British waters that they were a staple food for the working class. Whelks, cockles, mussels, these were all cheap, accessible proteins. There's a famous Victorian song, Molly Malone, about a young woman who sells cockles and mussels alive-o through the streets of Dublin. It captures this aspect of Victorian food culture, street vendors providing affordable seafood to the urban poor. You continue through the market, your empty stomach a constant reminder of your purpose. The dock is your destination, but the displays of food are distracting. There's a baker with loaves of bread lined up, a butcher with various cuts hanging from hooks, the better cuts at eye level, the cheaper offal and trimmings lower down for those who can't afford better. One stall catches your attention. A woman is selling what look like small, round, red and white striped candies. Bullseyes, finest mint bullseyes, she calls out. Now this is something special from Victorian times. The bullseye candy, named because its red and white stripes supposedly resembled a bullseye, was one of the most popular sweets of the era. Despite the somewhat unappetizing name, these mint-flavoured hard candies were beloved by those who could afford them. The 1800s saw an explosion in candy production and consumption. Advances in manufacturing made it possible to produce sweets in larger quantities and at lower prices. By the end of Victoria's reign, candy was no longer just for the wealthy. It was increasingly accessible to working-class people, too. You pause, tempted. The penny in your pocket could buy you several of these sweet treats, but it could also buy half a loaf of bread or a bowl of hot eels that would do more to quiet your hunger. Practical needs win out over momentary pleasure, a common calculation for the Victorian poor. You finally reach the docks. The Thames is busy with ships being loaded and unloaded, goods from all over the British Empire flowing in and out of London. You join a group of men waiting for the foreman to pick day labourers. You, and you, and you. The foreman points, selecting men from the crowd. You hold your breath, hoping, you too, lad. Half day's work unloading the sugar ship. Sugar ship. This could be a stroke of luck. Unloading sugar often meant some would be spilled and workers might be able to collect a little of this valuable commodity to take home. The work is back-breaking. Sacks of raw sugar, each weighing more than you do, must be carried from the ship to the warehouse. By midday, your muscles are screaming, your hands are blistered, and your clothes are damp with sweat despite the cool air. But you've managed to gather a small amount of spilled sugar carefully tucked into a cloth in your pocket. Your mother will be thrilled. This means sweeter tea for a few days, or perhaps she can make a simple treat with it. The foreman pays you your half-day's wage, a few coins that will help with next week's rent. It's not much, but combined with the sugar, today has been a success. On your way home, you decide to spend a fraction of your earnings on food. The smell of hot pies from a street vendor is too tempting to resist. These aren't the fancy meat pies of the wealthy, with their buttery crusts and choice fillings. These are humble affairs, a thin crust containing whatever meat was cheap that day, bulked out with onions and potatoes. What's in them today? You ask the vendor. Or mutton, he says, which could mean actual sheep meat, or it might be something less identifiable. Food fraud wasn't uncommon in Victorian England. What was sold as mutton might be horse, dog, or even cat meat in the worst cases. But you're hungry, and the pie is hot and filling. You hand over your coin and receive the small pastry, steam escaping as you break into it. The filling is greasy and salty, with chunks of something chewy that might indeed be mutton. There are pieces of potato and onion, and a thick gravy that helps to make it more substantial. As you eat, walking slowly to make the experience last longer, you pass by a group of children playing in the street. Their clothes are even more ragged than yours, their faces thin with hunger. One small boy watches you eat with undisguised longing. Victorian children had it especially hard when it came to food. Child labour was common, with many working long hours in factories, mines, or as chimney sweeps or street sellers. They needed calories to grow and to fuel their work, but often had to make do with less than adults. Schools for poor children sometimes provided a basic meal, usually a bowl of porridge or soup, recognizing that hungry children couldn't learn effectively. Charitable organizations like the Salvation Army also set up food depots in some cities, offering affordable meals to the destitute. But these safety nets had large holes, and many children went hungry. You break off a piece of your pie and hand it to the watching boy. He grabs it quickly, as if afraid you'll change your mind, then darts away to share it with the other children. The small act of generosity makes your own meal seem even more satisfying somehow. By the time you reach home, the winter day is already fading into evening. Your mother looks up from her mending, her face lighting up when you tell her about the dock work and show her the sugar you managed to salvage. "We'll have a proper Sunday dinner this week," she says, the prospect putting energy into her tired voice. "I've been saving the bones from last month, and with your wages we can get a bit of meat to go with them." Sunday dinner was the culinary highlight of the week for most Victorian families. Even the poor tried to have something special if they could possibly afford it. A small joint of meat perhaps, or at least a meat pudding or pie made with cheaper cuts, bulked out with suet pastry and vegetables. For the middle and upper classes, Sunday dinner was an elaborate affair, a roast joint of beef, lamb, or pork, served with vegetables, potatoes, gravy, and followed by a pudding of some kind. It was a time for family to gather, a weekly festival of food in an era before restaurants were common for anyone but the wealthy. Your mother sets about making the evening meal, more vegetable soup, but with a precious sprinkle of the salvaged sugar added to balance the cabbage's bitterness. The simple addition transforms the humble dish into something more complex and satisfying. As you eat, she tells you about her day. She took in washing from some of the better-off families in the neighborhood, back-breaking work that involves heating water, scrubbing clothes by hand, wringing them out and hanging them to dry, but it brings in a few pence. And sometimes the families give her leftover food as well as payment. "Mrs. Jenkins gave me the end of their bread," she says. "It's fine quality, much better than what we can afford. We'll have it for breakfast." This was another survival strategy for the Victorian poor, finding ways to access the cast-offs of the wealthy. Servants in grand houses often lived partly on leftovers from their employers' tables. Those without such positions might do occasional work for better-off families in hopes of similar benefits. After dinner, you're still hungry. You're almost always still hungry, but less desperately so than usual. The pie from earlier, the vegetable soup, and the knowledge that Sunday will bring something special all help to make the persistent emptiness more bearable. Your mother takes out the precious tea caddy, a small tin box that keeps the tea leaves safe. Tea was expensive enough that it needed to be protected, not left loose where it might be spoiled or wasted. She measures out a tiny amount to add to the already used leaves from the morning. With a sprinkle of the salvaged sugar, the evening tea will be a relative luxury. This careful management of food resources was essential for survival. Nothing was wasted. Stale bread became bread pudding. Meat bones were boiled multiple times for stock. Vegetable trimmings went into soups. Used tea leaves were dried and reused until they had no flavor left at all. As you sip the sweet tea, weak but made special by the sugar, you think about Sunday's promised meal. In your mind, it becomes a feast worthy of royalty, though in reality it will be modest by modern standards. Anticipation is its own form of nourishment in hard times. The evening draws in. Without much lighting, candles and oil are expensive. There's not much to do once darkness falls, except sleep. Your body is tired from the dock work anyway, the pleasant ache of muscles that have earned their rest. You climb back to your straw mattress, pulling the thin blanket up against the growing chill. Outside, the sounds of the city are changing as day workers head home and night workers emerge. Among them are the night food sellers, vendors of hot drinks, simple soups, and other offerings for those whose work doesn't stop when the sun goes down. In the distance, you can just make out a call, hot pea soup, penny a bowl. The night pea soup sellers were a common feature of Victorian London, offering a hot, nutritious meal to night workers, late revellers and the homeless, made from dried split peas, onions, herbs, and sometimes a ham bone for flavour. It was filling, warming and cheap. Tomorrow will bring more of the same struggles for food, but tonight, with a day's work behind you, some sugar in the house, and the prospect of Sunday dinner ahead, things seem a little less desperate than usual. Your eyes grow heavy as you listen to the distant street sounds. The mattress doesn't feel quite so lumpy now. Your body sinks a bit deeper, muscles releasing the day's tensions, getting more comfortable. That's it, as your mind drifts to thoughts of Sunday's meal, imagining the smell of cooking meat filling your small home, nice and easy now, settling in as the last street vendors call out their wares in the darkening London streets. A table with a real feast spread out on it, in your dreams at least. As morning light filters through the window once more, the fantasy meal fades away, replaced by reality. Sunday is still a day away, but today brings its own possibilities. You blink away sleep, feeling the weight of your body against the straw mattress. The familiar sounds of morning in Victorian London filter in through the thin walls, vendors already calling, carriage wheels on cobblestones, the distant whistle of an early train. Each muscle relaxes as you take a moment before facing the day. Downstairs, your mother has already started the morning routine. The kettle sings softly on the hearth. She's cutting the bread from Mrs. Jenkins, noticeably whiter and finer than what you usually eat. White bread was a status symbol in Victorian England. The wealthy ate the refined white loaves, while coarser, darker bread was for the poor. Ironically, that coarse brown bread was actually healthier, containing more of the grain's nutrients, but the Victorians didn't know that. White bread meant wealth and refinement. It's what everyone aspired to eat. Got plans today? Your mother asks as you sit down to breakfast. Thought I'd try the market again, you say. End of the day, sometimes they sell things cheap rather than take them home. She nods approvingly. This was another survival strategy, timing your shopping to get the best deals. At the end of the market day, prices would often drop as vendors tried to offload perishable goods. A savvy shopper with even a few pennies could sometimes get bargains. The tea today is slightly better than usual, brewed from the first steeping of the day's leaves with a tiny pinch of yesterday's salvaged sugar. The bread is a revelation, soft, white, and free from the gritty bits sometimes found in cheaper loaves. Adulteration of food was a serious problem in Victorian England. Unscrupulous bakers might add chalk, alum, or even ground bones to flour to make it go further. Milk might be watered down. Coffee could be bulked out with chicory, or even ground acorns. The poor were most vulnerable to such practices, lacking the power to complain or shop elsewhere. It wasn't until later in the Victorian era that food safety laws began to address these issues. The 1860 Adulteration of Food and Drink Act was a start, but it had limited effectiveness. The Sale of Food and Drugs Act of 1875 had more teeth, imposing penalties on those caught adulterating food products. Breakfast finished, you head out for the day. The streets are quieter than on market day, but still busy with the constant flow of Victorian urban life. You pass a street seller with a large metal can strapped to his chest, steam rising from it. Pea soup, hot pea soup. The smell is tempting, rich, savoury, warming. Pea soup was a staple food for the Victorian working class, made from dried split peas, onions, and sometimes a bit of bacon or ham for flavour. It was nutritious, filling, and relatively cheap. Street sellers would carry it in insulated containers, serving it in mugs to customers who drink it on the spot, then return the mug. You keep walking, saving your pennies for potential market bargains later. The city opens up around you, the close-packed slums giving way to slightly better areas, then to commercial districts. The smell changes too, less sewage and unwashed bodies, more coal smoke and horse manure. Not exactly pleasant, but different. On a corner, you spot a man selling hot potatoes from a cart with a small oven built into it. Jacket potatoes, hot and floury, penny each. Potatoes were another cornerstone of the Victorian poor diet. Introduced to Britain centuries earlier, by Victoria's reign they had become essential. They were relatively cheap, grew well in British soil, and provided good calories for working people. The Irish potato famine of the 1840s showed the danger of over-reliance on a single crop, but in England, with its more diverse agriculture, potatoes remained a reliable staple. A hot jacket potato could warm both hands and belly on a cold Victorian day. Next to the potato seller is a woman with a different offering. Gingerbread! Fresh gingerbread! Gingerbread was a popular Victorian sweet treat. Made with molasses or treacle rather than expensive refined sugar, it was relatively affordable. The spicy warmth of ginger made it particularly welcome in winter months. Some sellers would make elaborate moulded gingerbread figures, but this woman's offerings are simple squares, more affordable for working people. The smell triggers a memory from childhood, a rare treat on a holiday, the sweet, spicy taste unlike anything in your usual diet. Your mouth waters, but again, you resist. The market bargains are your priority today. By midday, you've walked several miles through the city. Your stomach complains, but you've grown used to ignoring it. Finally, you reach the market. It's not as busy as yesterday, but there's still plenty of activity. You wander through, noting prices, calculating what might be most filling for the least money. A fishmonger catches your eye. He has a barrel of pickled herring, a common food for the working class. Herring were abundant in British waters, and when pickled would last without refrigeration. The strong flavour took some getting used to, but the fish provided valuable protein and fat. "Tuppence for 4, the fishmonger says, seeing your interest. "Good ones these, pickled last week." You consider it. 4 herrings would make a good addition to tomorrow's meals, and they'd keep for a few days. You decide to wait, though, seeing if prices drop further as the day goes on. Next, you pass a butcher's stall. The prime cuts are well out of your price range, but there's a tray of what looks like offal, organ meats and trimmings. There are kidneys, liver, tripe, cow stomach, and something you recognise as a sheep's head. Offal was a crucial protein source for the Victorian poor. Parts that the wealthy disdained were affordable and, when properly prepared, nutritious and even tasty. Kidneys could be devilled, cooked with spicy seasonings. Liver and onions was a classic dish. Tripe could be simmered until tender. A sheep's head could provide multiple meals. The meat picked off, the brain turned into a spread, even the tongue utilised. What's the sheep's head going for, you ask? "Threepence," the butcher replies. "Last one I've got." 3 pence is a significant amount of your available funds, but the head would provide several meals' worth of meat. It's the kind of calculation the Victorian poor made constantly, weighing immediate hunger against longer-term planning. "I'll come back," you say, moving on to check other options. A vegetable seller has a pile of slightly wilted cabbages. "Penny for 2, she calls. "Still good for soup?" Vegetables that were past their prime were another budget option. They might not look appealing, but cooked into a soup or stew, they provided valuable nutrition at a fraction of the cost of fresher produce. As the afternoon progresses, you continue your careful survey of the market. Prices begin to drop as closing time approaches. The fishmonger now offers 6 herrings for 2pence instead of 4. The sheep's head goes down to 2pence. The cabbage seller is practically giving away her remaining stock. This is what you've been waiting for. With careful timing and a bit of haggling, your few coins can go much further. You make your purchases. The sheep's head, 4 herrings, saving a halfpenny compared to earlier, and 3 cabbages. It's quite a haul to carry home, but it will make a significant difference to the coming week's meals. On your way back, laden with your purchases wrapped in newspaper, you pass a grand house. Through an open kitchen window, you catch a glimpse of the preparations for an evening meal. A large joint of beef is being basted. Vegetables are being trimmed and shaped with precision. A cook directs several kitchen maids in the complex choreography of upper-class dining. The contrast between this scene and your own food situation is stark. The wealthy Victorians ate elaborate multi-course meals, often following French cuisine traditions. Dinner parties might include soup, fish, a meat course, a game course, sweet and savoury puddings, desserts, and a cheese course. The food was as much about display as nourishment, showing off one's wealth and refinement. The middle classes emulated this when they could, though usually with fewer courses and less extravagance. They increasingly employed servants, including cooks, as the Victorian era progressed, and the servant problem became a common topic of conversation among the upwardly mobile. But for the poor, food remained primarily functional. Getting enough calories to survive was the priority. Taste, presentation, and variety were luxuries few could afford to prioritize. You turn away from the grand house, adjusting your load of humble purchases. The sheep's head is heavy, but the weight is reassuring. It represents security, multiple meals, protein that will help sustain your family's labor. By the time you reach home, the winter evening is closing in. Your mother is surprised and pleased by your market success. A sheep's head, and for only 2p. That'll make a fine dinner tomorrow after church, she says, already planning how to make the most of it. In Victorian times, Sunday had a rhythm all its own. For the religious, church attendance was expected. Shops were closed, work was minimized, though not eliminated, especially for women who still had to cook and clean. And the Sunday dinner was the culinary highlight of the week. Even poor families tried to have something special for Sunday dinner if they could possibly afford it. It was a time to gather, to briefly enjoy food as more than mere survival, to participate in a cultural tradition that cut across class lines, though with very different implementations. Your mother sets about preparing the evening meal, a simple soup made from one of the cabbages, bulked out with a potato and an onion. Tomorrow she'll tackle the sheep's head, a process that will take hours of careful cooking to extract maximum value from it. "Did you see the baker's stall?" she asks as she chops the vegetables. "Sometimes he sells day-old bread cheap at the end of the market." "Didn't get that far," you admit, "but I got these instead." You show her the herrings, their silver skin dull with the pickling brine. "Perfect," she nods. "We'll have those with potatoes on Monday." This kind of food planning was essential for survival. Nothing could be wasted. Every purchase had to be maximized. Leftovers were incorporated into new dishes. Bones were boiled multiple times for stock. Even stale bread found uses in puddings or as thickening for soups. The cabbage soup is simple but satisfying. The vegetable has been cooked until very soft, its natural sweetness emerging. There's no meat in it, but your mother has added a spoonful of dripping, saved fat from previous meat cooking, for flavor and calories. A sprinkle of salt itself, not a given in the poorest households, completes the dish. You eat slowly, making it last. The warmth spreads through your body, taking the edge off the constant hunger. It's not a feast by any means, but it's nourishing in its way. After dinner, with darkness fully settled, there's little to do. Candles and lamp oil are expensive, so most poor Victorian families simply went to bed when it got dark, especially in winter when the nights were long. Reading material was limited for those with minimal education anyway, and other entertainments cost money you didn't have. But tonight, your mother surprises you. From a hidden place, she takes out a small newspaper-wrapped package. Inside is a single tallow candle, made from rendered animal fat rather than expensive beeswax or newer paraffin. It gives off a smoky, slightly unpleasant smell when lit, but provides enough light to sit up for another hour. "Mrs. Jenkins gave it to me," she explains. "Thought we might enjoy a bit of evening together with Sunday coming." In the flickering light, she tells stories from her own childhood when Victoria was a young queen and the world seemed full of possibilities. Stories of the countryside she came from, where food grew all around and hunger was less constant than in the city. Stories of seasonal treats. Blackberries picked from hedgerows in autumn, hazelnuts gathered in woods, wild greens foraged from fields in spring. The rural poor had different food challenges than their urban counterparts. They often had better access to fresh produce, but less cash to buy imported or manufactured goods. They might grow vegetables in small garden plots, keep chickens for eggs, or even raise a pig for slaughter if they were fortunate. Poaching, illegally hunting game on aristocratic estates, was a risky but common way to supplement protein intake. As the Victorian era progressed, however, rural life changed dramatically. The ongoing process of enclosure privatized previously common land. Industrialization drew people to cities. Traditional rural foodways began to fade, though they never disappeared entirely. The candle burns low, its light dimming. You feel a sense of contentment rare in your hard-scrabble existence. Tomorrow brings the promise of the sheep's head dinner. The herrings and remaining cabbages will see you through much of the week. For a brief moment, food insecurity isn't looming quite so large. Time for bed, your mother says as the candle gutters out. Church in the morning, then I'll start on that sheep's head. You climb back to your straw mattress, feeling the days walking in your tired legs. The smell of cabbage soup lingers in the small home, not unpleasant now that it represents a full belly. Outside, the city continues its nighttime rhythm, distant shouts, occasional carriage wheels, the lamplighter making his rounds in better neighbourhoods. Morning comes with the sound of church bells. Sunday in Victorian London had its own soundscape, less industrial noise, more religious calling. You dress in your slightly better clothes, still patched and worn, but kept for Sunday use. Church attendance wasn't just a religious obligation, it was also a social one. For the poor, it could provide community and sometimes material assistance. Many churches ran soup kitchens or distributed food to needy parishioners. Some wealthy individuals performed charity by paying for Sunday dinners for poor families or groups of children. After the service, you return home to find your mother already at work on the sheep's head. She's removed the brain and tongue, setting them aside for separate preparation. The head itself is in a pot of simmering water with an onion, slowly cooking to tenderize the meat. Need anything else done? You ask, watching her methodical work. Could use some parsley if you can find any, she says. Grows wild by the canal sometimes. Foraging was another survival strategy, even in urban environments. Certain plants grew in neglected corners of the city, dandelions, nettles, parsley, and other edibles that could add variety and nutrition to otherwise plain meals. Knowledge of what was safe to eat and where to find it was passed down through generations. You head out to check the canal banks, walking through a quieter Sunday London. Many shops are closed, though food vendors still operate. The smell of Sunday dinners cooking drifts from homes and boarding houses, roasting meat for those who can afford it, simpler fare for others. Near the canal, you find a patch of wild parsley growing in a damp, sunny spot. You pick a good handful, careful to leave plenty for future growth. Sustainability was an instinctive practice for those who relied on such resources. On your way back, you pass a street vendor selling hot chestnuts from a brazier. The warm, sweet smell is enticing. Chestnuts were a popular Victorian street food in winter months, providing both warmth and nutrition. They contained carbohydrates, protein, and fat, all valuable for hard-working bodies in the cold. You have a halfpenny left from yesterday's market trip. After a moment's hesitation, you spend it on a small paper cone of hot chestnuts. It's an indulgence, yes, but a modest one, and the warmth in your cold hands is worth it. You eat one, savouring the sweet, starchy flavour, then save the rest to share with your mother. Back home, the sheep's head has progressed. The meat is becoming tender, pulling away from the bone. The small kitchen space is filled with the rich smell of slow cooking. Your mother has made a simple stuffing from stale bread, the sheep's brain, and some herbs, which will be baked separately. Found the parsley, you say, presenting your foraged herb. And these? You offer the remaining chestnuts. Her face lights up at the unexpected treat. She takes one, eating it slowly, clearly savouring the rare sweetness. Perfect end to our dinner these will be, she says, setting the rest aside. The next few hours are devoted to the careful preparation of this important meal. Nothing is wasted. The meat is picked from the head, The cooking liquid becomes a gravy. The tongue is sliced thinly. The brain stuffing is formed into small cakes and baked until crisp on the outside. To accompany it all, there are potatoes boiled in their skins and one of the remaining cabbages chopped and slowly stewed with a tiny bit of dripping for richness. When finally assembled on your chipped plates, it looks like a feast by your standards. There's protein, vegetables, even the luxury of gravy. The portions aren't large. There are still meals to be made from the leftovers, but it's more substantial than your usual fare. You sit at the small table, taking a moment to appreciate what's before you. Your mother says a brief grace, thanking God for the provision. Then you eat, slowly and with appreciation. The meat is tender from the long cooking. The brain stuffing is rich and savoury. The potatoes are fluffy inside their skins. The cabbage has sweetened with cooking. It's a balanced meal by Victorian standards, providing protein, carbohydrates and some vegetables. What it lacks in refinement compared to the dining of the wealthy, it makes up for in the satisfaction of having created something nourishing from what others might have discarded. There's a certain pride in this kind of resourcefulness, a skill born of necessity, but valuable nonetheless. After the main course, you share the remaining chestnuts, each taking one and eating it slowly, making the pleasure last. It's a simple dessert, but a perfect end to the Sunday meal. With dinner finished, there's the careful work of preserving what's left. The remaining meat is wrapped for tomorrow. Bones go back into the pot for another round of stock making. Even the potato skins are saved. They'll be crisped up for a snack later in the week. The evening settles in, bringing with it the satisfaction of a good meal and the knowledge that the coming days are provided for, at least to some extent. In the Victorian working-class experience, this temporary food security was as close to luxury as many got. You help clean up, then sit by the small fire with your mother as darkness falls. The chestnuts and good meal have created a rare moment of contentment. Your body feels nourished, muscles relaxing into the unfamiliar sensation of having enough. Next Sunday, we should have the last of the joint Mrs. Parker promised, your mother says, already planning ahead. The constant cycle of securing food never really stops. Mrs. Parker is the butcher's wife who occasionally saves scraps and end pieces for your mother in exchange for some mending work. These informal economies were crucial for survival, bartering skills or labour for food, creating networks of mutual aid within communities. As the fire dies down to embers, you find yourself yawning. The warm meal has made you sleepy. It's time for bed anyway. Tomorrow brings another week of work and the ongoing challenge of finding enough to eat. You climb the stairs to your straw mattress one more time, your body heavy with food and fatigue. The familiar scratchiness of the straw seems less noticeable tonight. Through the thin walls, you can hear neighbours settling for the night too, the shared rhythm of Victorian working-class life. Your mind drifts to the week ahead. Monday will bring the herrings with potatoes. Tuesday might be a soup from the sheep's head stock with the last cabbage. Wednesday, well, that depends on what work can be found, what bargains might appear. This constant calculation, this never-ending math of survival was the daily reality for millions in Victorian England. What seems to us like extreme poverty or even a historical curiosity was simply life for them, difficult, precarious, but with its own skills and even occasional satisfactions. Your eyelids grow heavy as you settle deeper into the mattress. The night sounds of the city fade as your awareness turns inward. Your muscles loosen one by one, the tension of constant hunger temporarily eased by the Sunday dinner. Your breathing slows naturally as you sink toward sleep, drifting on the unusual sensation of being truly satisfied, getting comfortable now, nice and easy as your body relaxes completely and your mind begins to wander into dreams of Dreams of endless tables laden with food, a fantasy that dissolves as dawn breaks on Monday morning. The comfort of Sunday's good meal lingers in your body though. Your muscles feel stronger, your mind clearer. It's amazing what proper nourishment can do, even if it's just for one day out of 7. Your mother is already up, preparing the day's first pot of tea and warming the leftover sheep's head meat for breakfast. This kind of protein in the morning is a luxury, one that will help power you through the day's labour. Thought I'd try for work at the brewery today, you tell her between bites. They sometimes need extra hands for deliveries. The breweries of Victorian London were major employers, and delivery work, while physically demanding, paid relatively well. Beer was a staple drink for Victorians of all classes, considered safer than water in many cases, and providing both calories and hydration for working bodies. You finish breakfast and head out into the morning bustle. The streets are alive with workers making their way to factories, shops and construction sites. The Industrial Revolution had transformed work and consequently eating patterns. Factory schedules meant fixed meal times. Long hours meant food had to be portable or available for purchase near workplaces. The brewery looms ahead, a massive brick structure with tall chimneys releasing clouds of steam and the distinctive yeasty smell of beer production. You join a group of men waiting outside the delivery entrance, hoping to be selected for the day's work. The foreman appears, eyeing the assembled hopefuls. "Needs 6 strong backs today," he announces. "Big delivery to the docks." You straighten up, trying to look capable and energetic. The Sunday protein helps. You don't have the hollow-eyed look of those who've had nothing but bread and tea. You, the foreman points, selecting his crew. You hold your breath. "You too, lad. Look like you can handle yourself." Relief washes over you. A day's work means a day's pay, and that means more security in the constant battle against hunger. The work is indeed strenuous, rolling heavy barrels of beer onto wagons, securing them for transport, then unloading them at taverns and shops throughout the docklands. Each barrel weighs more than you do, and by midday your muscles are screaming. "Half hour for dinner," the foreman announces as the church bells strike noon. Dinner, in Victorian working-class parlance, meant the midday meal, not the evening one. For labourers, it needed to be substantial enough to fuel the afternoon's work. Some men had brought food from home, bread and cheese wrapped in cloth, or perhaps a slice of bacon between bread. Others would buy from nearby food vendors. You've brought some of the leftover sheep's head meat, carefully wrapped in newspaper, with a chunk of bread. It's a good meal by your standards, providing protein and carbohydrates to keep you going. As you eat, sitting on an empty barrel in the brewery yard, you observe your fellow workers. Most look perpetually hungry, with the lean, wiry build common to working-class Victorians. Their food varies. Some have decent meals similar to yours, others make do with just bread or a potato. One older man catches your eye, unwrapping something that makes your mouth water, a slice of what looks like meat pie. The wife's speciality, he says, noticing your interest. Makes them once a week from whatever scraps the butcher'll sell cheap. Stretch the meat with potatoes and onions, bit of bacon fat for flavour. Feeds us 3 days if we're careful. This kind of food strategy was common, finding ways to make expensive ingredients like meat go further by combining them with cheaper fillers. Pies, puddings and stews all served this purpose, turning a small amount of protein into multiple meals. The afternoon's work is as grueling as the morning's, but the good meal at midday helps you keep pace. By the time the day ends, you're exhausted but satisfied with your efforts. The foreman pays the day labourers, handing over coins that represent security for the coming days. On your way home you pass through a street market. It's not the main market day, but there are still vendors selling food of various kinds. With coins in your pocket, you have options that weren't available yesterday. One stall catches your attention, a woman selling what look like small black puddings. Black pudding was a traditional British food made from blood, usually pig's blood, mixed with fat, oatmeal and seasonings, then formed into sausages and boiled. Rich in iron and protein, it was nutritious and relatively affordable. Fresh made this morning, the vendor assures you. Tuppence for two. You consider it. The herrings are planned for tonight, but these would keep for tomorrow and provide a welcome change from the sheep's head leftovers. You decide to make the purchase, exchanging 2 pennies for the wrapped puddings. With your remaining money, you buy a small loaf of bread and a couple of apples, not the prime specimens that would go to wealthy homes, but slightly bruised ones sold at a discount. Fruit was a relative luxury for the poor, especially in winter when availability was limited and prices higher. When you reach home, your mother is preparing the herrings for dinner, laying them out with boiled potatoes. The small fish have been soaked to remove some of the salt from the pickling process, then will be lightly fried in a bit of dripping. Got paid, you announce, showing her your purchases. Black pudding for tomorrow, fresh bread, and even some apples. Her face lights up at this unexpected bounty. We'll have an apple each tonight and save the rest for tomorrow, she decides, already incorporating the new items into her mental meal plan. The herring dinner is simple but satisfying. The fish is salty and rich, providing valuable omega-3 fats, though neither of you would have known to call them that. The potatoes provide filling starch, and the apple, slightly soft but still sweet, is a perfect end to the meal, a burst of fresh flavour in a diet often dominated by preserved and cooked foods. As you eat, your mother shares news from her day's work. Laundry again, this time for a boarding house. They gave me the heel of a ham to take home, she says. Not much meat left on it, but it'll flavour a soup nicely. This kind of payment in kind was common in the informal economy. Cash was scarce, but food could be shared or bartered. The ham bone might have little monetary value, but would add rich flavour to a pot of otherwise plain vegetables. The evening passes quietly. With better food in your bellies and the security of both wages and provisions in the house, there's a rare sense of ease. Tomorrow is provided for, at least in terms of basic sustenance. Morning brings a light drizzle, the kind of damp chill that seeps into bones and makes physical labour even harder. But there's hot tea to start the day, and black pudding fried crisp on the outside, soft within. It's rich, savoury food that sits heavily in the stomach, providing lasting energy. You head out again in search of work, this time trying the docks. Victorian London's port was one of the busiest in the world, a hub of the global trade network that fueled the British Empire. Ships arrived daily carrying goods from across the globe, many of them food items that were transforming British diets. Tea from India and China, sugar from the Caribbean, spices from the East Indies, wheat from America and Australia, beef from Argentina, fruit from Mediterranean countries. The Victorian era saw an explosion in food imports that gradually changed what was available and affordable. Not that most of these exotic imports reached working-class tables in any quantity. Tea was the exception. It had become affordable enough to be a staple even for the poor, though often brewed weak and reused multiple times. But sugar remained relatively expensive until late in the Victorian period, and tropical fruits were rare luxuries. The dock foreman shakes his head when you inquire about work. "Nothing today, lad. Ship we were expecting's been delayed." Disappointed but not surprised, such is the precarious nature of casual labour, you decide to walk through the market area again. Sometimes opportunities arise unexpectedly, and being in the right place at the right time can make the difference between eating and going hungry. As you walk, the rain intensifies, driving many people to seek shelter. You duck under the awning of a shop, joining others waiting out the worst of the downpour. Next to you, a woman with a basket is muttering in annoyance. "Needed to get these to the hotel kitchen before noon," she says to no one in particular. Looking closer, you see her basket contains mushrooms, wild ones, apparently gathered from parks or woods on the city outskirts. Foraging remained an important food source even in industrialised Victorian London. The city had numerous parks and open spaces where edible plants grew. Beyond the built-up areas, woods and fields still offered seasonal bounty for those who knew what to look for. Mushrooms, berries, nuts, and wild greens all supplemented diets, especially for those on the economic margins. The knowledge of what was safe to eat, where to find it, and when it was in season was valuable information passed down through families or communities. "I could take them," you offer, seeing an opportunity. "If there's payment in it." The woman eyes you assessingly. "Hotel pays me 6p for the lot. I'll give you 2p if you get them there dry and before noon." It's a fair offer. You take the basket, covering it with your jacket to protect the mushrooms from the rain, and get directions to the hotel. It's in a wealthier part of London, catering to businessmen and visitors rather than locals. The hotel kitchen is a revelation, a large, well-equipped space with multiple staff preparing elaborate meals. The head cook inspects the mushrooms with a critical eye before nodding approval. A kitchen worker counts out 6p, which you'll split with the forager as agreed. But before you leave, the cook gestures to a pot simmering on the massive stove. "Had breakfast yet, lad? We've more porridge than the guests wanted. Help yourself to a bowl if you've the time." This unexpected generosity isn't as rare as you might think. While Victorian society had stark class divisions, individual kindness still existed. Many cooks and household staff would share leftovers or excess food with the poor, especially children or those who seemed particularly hungry. The porridge is like nothing you've had before, creamy, sweetened with sugar and topped with stewed fruit. It's a far cry from the plain oats cooked in water that might be your usual fare if you could afford oats at all. You eat it slowly, savouring each spoonful, aware of the luxury it represents. With a full stomach and 2p in your pocket from the mushroom delivery, you head back to the forager to deliver her share. She's grateful for both the money and for staying dry while you made the trek to the hotel. "Look me up if you need work again," she says. "I supply several kitchens and sometimes need reliable hands." This kind of networking was essential in the informal Victorian economy. Regular employment was not guaranteed for many, especially the unskilled. Building relationships with those who might offer work, even irregular work, could make the difference between subsistence and destitution. The rain has eased to a drizzle again, and you continue your walk through the market area. The wet weather has deterred some vendors and customers, making the usually bustling space quieter than normal. Those who remain have a bedraggled look, trying to protect their goods from the damp. A fruit seller catches your eye, frantically trying to cover his display as a new shower threatens. You help him secure an oilcloth over the stall, earning a nod of thanks. "Appreciate it, lad. Here, take these for your trouble." He hands you a small bag of plums, slightly overripe but still perfectly edible. "Need to sell the best ones, but these are good enough for cooking." Another windfall. Fruit was often scarce in poor diets, especially in winter and early spring before the new season's crops came in. These plums might be past their prime for eating fresh, but they'd stew up beautifully with a little water and perhaps a precious pinch of sugar. With your unexpected bounty, tuppence and a bag of plums, you decide to head home earlier than planned. The continuing rain makes finding casual work unlikely, and you've already had more success than many would on such a day. Your mother is surprised to see you back so soon, but delighted by the plums. "These will make a lovely pudding with the last of yesterday's bread," she says, already planning how to transform the simple ingredients into something special. Victorian home cooking, especially among the poor, was built on these principles of transformation and extension. Stale bread became bread pudding, overripe fruit was stewed or preserved, meat scraps went into pies or puddings. Nothing was wasted because nothing could be afforded to be wasted. The afternoon is spent indoors, escaping the persistent rain. Your mother teaches you to darn socks, a valuable skill in a time when clothing was expensive and had to last as long as possible. Like food, clothing had to be maintained, repaired, and repurposed to extract maximum value. By evening, the small home is filled with the sweet smell of cooking plums. The bread pudding bakes slowly by the fire, the stale bread soaking up the juice from the fruit, creating a simple but delicious dessert. Dinner is the black pudding from this morning, sliced and fried again, served with the last of the potatoes and some onions. It's a filling meal, rich in iron from the blood in the pudding, with the starch of the potatoes providing energy. The bread and plum pudding that follows is a perfect end to the meal, sweet, comforting and satisfying. In the flicker of firelight with rain pattering on the roof and good food in your belly, there's a moment of contentment that transcends the usual hardships. "We've done well these past days," your mother says, sipping the last of the evening's tea. "Better than many." She's right. Through a combination of work, resourcefulness, opportunism, and a little luck, you've eaten relatively well by working-class Victorian standards. Not every day or week would be like this. There would be leaner times, harder times. But for now, there's security in having food for tomorrow and a little money set aside. This was the constant balancing act of Victorian working-class life, taking advantage of good fortune when it came, stretching resources as far as possible, and developing the resilience to weather the inevitable hard times. As the fire burns down and evening deepens into night, you reflect on the food cultures you've encountered in just these few days, from street vendors selling eels and potatoes to the elaborate preparations glimpsed in the hotel kitchen to your mother's careful transformation of simple ingredients into nourishing meals. Victorian food was not a single thing, but many things, varying dramatically by class, location, season, and individual circumstance. What united these diverse experiences was the central importance of food in daily life and thinking. In an era before social safety nets, securing food was a primary concern that shaped behaviours, relationships, and entire communities. You climb the familiar stairs to your straw mattress one more time, your body heavy with the day's good fortune in food. The usual hunger that might keep you awake is absent tonight, replaced by the pleasant fullness of the black pudding, potatoes, and fruit desserts. Outside, rain continues to fall on Victorian London, drumming softly on the roof. Inside, in the quiet darkness of your small room, there's the rare luxury of falling asleep without the gnawing emptiness of hunger. Your muscles relax one by one, the tension leaving your body as you sink deeper into the mattress. Your breathing slows naturally, each exhale a little longer than the one before. That heavy, comfortable feeling spreads through your limbs as your mind begins to drift. Nice and easy now, settling in as the rain creates its gentle rhythm on the roof above. Your thoughts grow vaguer, less distinct as sleep approaches. where tables groan with food that never runs out. The dream lingers as you open your eyes to a new Victorian morning. Rain has given way to weak sunshine filtering through the window. The city sounds different today. There's excitement in the air, voices calling with more animation than usual. You stretch on your straw mattress, feeling each muscle loosen. The good food of recent days has made a difference to how your body feels. Less hollow, more substantial. Your breathing is deep, and even as you take a moment before rising, downstairs your mother is already up as usual, but she too seems energized. It's market day, she reminds you, but not just any market day, the monthly big market. That explains the excitement. The regular markets happened several times a week, but once a month there was a larger gathering with vendors coming from further afield, bringing more variety and often better prices due to increased competition. Thought we might treat ourselves, she continues, setting down a bowl of porridge. Real porridge today, not just bread soaked in tea. With what you earned at the brewery and the tuppence yesterday, we could get something special. The porridge is plain, made with water rather than milk, with no sugar or fruit, but it's hot and filling. Oats were relatively inexpensive and provided good energy for working bodies. Scottish Victorians in particular relied heavily on oats, consuming them in various forms, including porridge and oat cakes. What sort of special? You ask between spoonfuls. She smiles mysteriously. We'll see what catches our eye. But I was thinking perhaps a bit of cheese, or an orange. I haven't had an orange in years. These suggestions reveal much about Victorian food priorities. Cheese was nutritious and delicious, but relatively expensive for the poor. Oranges were exotic imports, available primarily in winter months, and represented a rare treat rather than an everyday food. Breakfast finished, you both prepare for the market expedition. It's a family outing of sorts, a break from the usual routine of work and subsistence. Even in the hardest lives, such small pleasures were important, moments of choice and agency in existences often defined by limitation and necessity. The streets are indeed busier than usual, with people converging on the market area from all directions. There's an energy to the crowd, a collective anticipation. Market day was a social occasion as much as an economic one, a chance to see neighbours, hear news, and briefly participate in a more varied world than daily work usually allowed. The market itself is a sensory explosion. Colours, sounds, smells, all competing for attention. Vendors shout their wares and prices. Customers haggle and debate. Children weave through the crowd on errands or simply for the excitement of it all. And the food, stalls selling everything from common vegetables to exotic imports, butchers with various cuts of meat displayed, fishmongers with their silver-scaled offerings laid on ice, bakers with loaves of different sizes and qualities, cheese sellers, spice merchants, sweet vendors, the whole spectrum of Victorian food commerce on display. Your mother leads the way, her experienced eye assessing quality and value with each glance. She pauses at a vegetable stall, examining carrots and turnips. Good for a stew, she murmurs, selecting a few of each. Root vegetables were staples for the Victorian working class. Relatively cheap, available year-round, and filling. They could be stored without refrigeration and added to soups and stews to make a small amount of meat go further. Next, she stops at a stall selling butter. This is more of a luxury item. Many poor families used dripping, beef fat instead, as it was much cheaper, but butter added a richness and flavour that transformed even the simplest foods. Pennyworth, she tells the vendor, who cuts a small portion from a larger block. It's not much, but it will add a special touch to the coming day's meals. As you move through the market, you notice a crowd gathered around one particular stall. Curiosity draws you closer. It's a vendor selling what appear to be small cakes or biscuits, but formed into shapes: animals, people, objects. Gingerbread figures, the seller calls sweetest gingerbread in London. Gingerbread had a long history in British food culture, predating the Victorian era by centuries. By Victoria's time, it had evolved into various forms, including the shaped gingerbread men or figures that became particularly associated with fairs and markets. The spicy sweet smell is enticing. Your mother sees your interest and smiles. "One small one, perhaps," she suggests, "as our special treat." You select a gingerbread figure shaped like a horse. It costs a halfpenny. Not expensive as treats go, but still a luxury in a budget where every coin is carefully accounted for. The first bite is revelatory, sweet with molasses or treacle rather than refined sugar, warming with ginger and other spices, soft rather than crisp. It's a complex flavour that's entirely different from your usual plain fare. This moment, standing in a Victorian market, enjoying a simple sweet treat with your mother, captures something essential about food beyond mere nutrition. Food is also culture, pleasure, shared experience. Even in lives constrained by poverty, these dimensions existed and mattered. Your mother makes a few more practical purchases: a small piece of bacon, some flour, a bunch of herbs to flavour soups. Then, true to her earlier suggestion, she approaches a fruit seller with exotic offerings from warmer climates. "How much for one orange?" she asks, eyeing the bright spheres with barely disguised longing. "Twopence each," the seller replies. "Fresh in from Spain last week." She hesitates, clearly calculating whether this luxury is justifiable. Twopence could buy a significant amount of more filling food: bread, potatoes, even some cheaper cuts of meat. An orange, while delicious and nutritious, would be gone quickly and leave little lasting impact on hunger. This kind of calculation was constant for the Victorian poor, weighing immediate pleasure against practical need, nutrition against satiety, variety against security. There were no easy answers, only constant compromise. After a moment, she makes her decision. "We'll share one," she says, selecting a medium-sized fruit and handing over the precious coins. The orange goes into her basket alongside the more practical purchases. It will be saved for later, a special end to the day's meals, something to look forward to through hours of work. As you continue through the market, your attention is caught by a different kind of vendor, one selling cooked food for immediate consumption. Victorian cities had vibrant street food cultures long before the term existed, with vendors selling everything from hot pies to roasted chestnuts, from whelks to baked potatoes. This particular seller has a large metal container with steam rising from it. "Hot pea soup," he calls. "Penny a bowl." Pea soup was a working-class staple, nutritious, filling and relatively affordable. Made from dried split peas, onions and sometimes a ham bone or bit of bacon for flavour, it provided protein and energy for labouring bodies. Your mother considers it. "Shall we?" she suggests. "Save lighting the fire for midday." You nod eagerly. The soup smells good, and the idea of a hot meal now rather than waiting until you return home is appealing. You each hand over a penny and receive a bowl of thick, steaming soup in return. Finding a relatively clean spot to stand, you eat the soup directly from the bowls. It's hearty fare, the peas cooked down to a thick puree, seasoned with salt and pepper, with small pieces of ham adding savoury notes. The warmth spreads through your body, a bulwark against the lingering chill of the spring morning. This kind of ready-to-eat food was an important part of working-class Victorian diets, especially for those with limited or no cooking facilities. Many poor families lived in single rooms or lodging houses where cooking was restricted or impossible. Street vendors filled this need, providing hot, affordable food that could be consumed on the spot. With your hunger satisfied by the soup, you continue your market exploration. Your mother makes a few final purchases, a small piece of cheese as she'd hoped, some more vegetables for the coming day's meals. Her careful planning ensures that the limited budget stretches as far as possible while still providing adequate nutrition. As you prepare to leave the market, a commotion near the center draws your attention. A well-dressed man is addressing the crowd, standing on a crate to make himself visible. "Ladies and gentlemen," he calls, "allow me to demonstrate the marvel of modern food preservation. Canned delicacies from around the world, fresh as the day they were prepared." He's a salesman for one of the new canning companies that were transforming food preservation in the Victorian era. Canning technology had been developed in the early 19th century, but it was during Victoria's reign that it became commercially significant and began to change how people ate. The demonstrator holds up various cans, fruits, vegetables, meats, even complete meals. "No more worrying about spoilage," he proclaims. "No more seasonal limitations, the bounty of summer available in the depths of winter." This was indeed revolutionary. Throughout human history, food preservation had been a constant challenge. Smoking, salting, pickling, and drying were traditional methods, but all had limitations. Canning offered a new level of convenience and variety, though initially at prices that made it more accessible to the middle and upper classes than to the poor. As the crowd watches, the salesman opens a can of peaches, offering small samples on toothpicks. Your mother manages to secure 2 pieces, one for each of you. The sweetness is almost shocking after your usual diet, the soft fruit texture unlike anything in your regular fare. Imagine such fruit available year-round, your mother says wistfully as you walk away. No more winters without fresh taste. By the late Victorian period, this dream would become more accessible as food preservation technology improved and prices decreased. But in the earlier and middle parts of the era, such convenience remained largely a luxury for those with greater means. The market visit complete, you head home with your purchases, a successful expedition that will enhance the coming day's meals. The orange is carried carefully, treated with the reverence its status as a special treat deserves. Back in your small home, your mother sets about organizing the new provisions. The vegetables go into a small cupboard where they'll keep for several days. The butter and cheese are wrapped carefully in damp cloth to preserve their freshness as long as possible. The bacon is hung from a hook where air can circulate around it. This careful management of food resources was essential in an era before refrigeration. Knowing how to store different foods to maximize their usable life was a crucial domestic skill passed down through generations and adapted to the specific challenges of urban Victorian life. For midday dinner, your mother prepares a simple meal of bread with a thin scraping of the precious butter, accompanied by a small portion of the cheese. Even this modest enhancement transforms the plain bread into something more satisfying, the rich fats complementing the starchy base. After eating, you set out again in search of work. The afternoon is spent at a construction site where they need extra hands to move building materials. It's hard labor but pays relatively well. By evening, you return home tired but with additional coins in your pocket. More security against the constant threat of hunger. Your mother has prepared a more substantial evening meal, a soup made with the vegetables purchased at the market, enhanced with the small piece of bacon for flavour. There's bread alongside it and the remaining cheese to follow. And then, the moment you've both been anticipating, the orange. Your mother brings it out almost ceremonially, placing it on the table between you. With care, she peels it, the sharp citrus scent filling the small room. The peel is set aside. It too will be used, perhaps dried and added to tea for flavour or used to scent the home. She divides the fruit precisely in half, ensuring equal shares. The bright segments gleam in the fading evening light, exotic treasures in your humble setting. The first taste is intensely sweet and tangy, unlike anything in your regular diet. The juice runs down your chin and you wipe it away with the back of your hand, not wanting to waste a drop. Each segment is savoured slowly, making the experience last as long as possible. This moment captures something essential about Victorian food experiences across all classes: the appreciation of special foods, the sharing of pleasure, the marking of occasions with culinary delights. While the specific foods and settings varied dramatically by social position, this fundamental relationship with food as more than mere sustenance was universal. As the last light fades from the day, your mother makes the evening's final pot of tea. Tonight it's slightly stronger than usual, a small luxury to complement the day's other treats. You sit together in the gathering darkness, the tea warming your hands, the taste of orange still lingering. "We've eaten well today," she says with satisfaction. "Better than many." It's true. Through a combination of work, careful budgeting, opportunistic purchasing, and the occasional small indulgence, you've experienced a relatively abundant day by working-class Victorian standards. Not every day would be like this. There would be leaner times, harder times. But for now, there's contentment in having good food in your belly and prospects for tomorrow. This was the reality of Victorian food for the working classes, not uniform deprivation as sometimes portrayed, but a complex landscape of scarcity and occasional abundance, of practical necessity and simple pleasures, of incredible resourcefulness in the face of limitation. As you prepare for bed, your body feels different than at the beginning of our story. The persistent hollow ache of hunger has been temporarily banished. Your muscles feel stronger, your mind clearer. Good food, even in modest quantities, has transformative power. You climb the stairs to your familiar straw mattress, finding your usual spot with practiced ease. The day's exertions and good meals have prepared you well for sleep. Your limbs feel heavy, pleasantly weary from work rather than weak from hunger. Outside, Victorian London continues its nighttime rhythms, distant carriages, occasional voices, the lamplighter making his rounds. Inside, in your small room, there's the rare luxury of falling asleep with a satisfied belly and the lingering taste of orange on your tongue. Your eyes grow heavy as you settle deeper into the mattress. The persistent hunger that often keeps you awake is absent tonight, replaced by a comfortable fullness that makes sleep come easier. Your breathing slows naturally, each breath a little deeper than the last. That heavy, relaxed feeling spreads through your body, starting in your legs and moving upward. Your muscles loosen one by one, releasing the day's tensions. The world begins to fade around the edges as sleep approaches. The sensations of Victorian life, the hardness of the straw mattress, the sounds from the street below, even the lingering taste of orange, all begin to recede as consciousness gives way to dream. Your thoughts become less distinct, more fluid, drifting like smoke in a gentle breeze. Your eyelids flutter closed, too heavy to keep open any longer. The rhythm of your breathing becomes the only reality, slow and steady, carrying you deeper into relaxation. The borders between wakefulness and sleep blur, becoming indistinct. And as you finally drift into complete sleep, there's a kind of peace that transcends time, connecting your Victorian experience to our own modern understanding of what it means to be nourished, not just in body, but in spirit. The simple pleasures of good food, shared with those we care about, create a universal language that speaks across centuries. Sleep now, leaving behind the challenges and triumphs of Victorian food culture, carrying with you a deeper appreciation for the meals that sustain you in your own time. Let your body sink completely into rest, your mind releasing all thoughts of hunger and satisfaction alike. Your breathing becomes deeper, slower, more rhythmic. Each exhale takes you further into the welcoming darkness of sleep. The tension melts from your face, your jaw relaxes, your forehead smooths. Sweet dreams of oranges and warm soup and freshly baked bread await in the realm beyond wakefulness. Sleep well, knowing that you've experienced a small taste of Victorian life, with all its hardships and simple joys. The struggle for daily bread that defined existence for millions during that era gives context to our own relationship with food, reminding us to appreciate both necessity and pleasure, sustenance and delight. Your consciousness fades completely now, sleep embracing you fully. Rest in the knowledge that you've briefly walked in Victorian shoes, understanding a little better the daily negotiations with hunger and satisfaction that shaped an era. Drift off now completely and peacefully into the deep and healing sleep your body craves.